Everyone, thank you for joining. We're over 70 individuals now and climbing. My name is Chris Mabry. For those of you who don't know me, I'm the general manager here at PreSales Collective. I led solution engineering teams prior to joining. I was an ambassador. I was an evangelist. I was a hyper connector on PreSales Collective and have had the opportunity now for almost a year to lead the organization. It's been a blessing. Chris White and I connected at my previous company. Actually, Chris had me on his LinkedIn Live show. Shout out to that. If you're on LinkedIn, join his LinkedIn Lives. They're really fun. You can just pop in and learn something real quick. He invited me to the show, I don't know, 4 years, 3 years ago, 4 years
It's at
ago,
least 3 years ago. Yeah,
many years
it's
ago.
amazing.
And
Yeah.
and then Chris and I connected. He came out and did a training at the SKO for the last company I worked for, and has since gone back and done another SKO that was in front of 240 plus solutions individuals. Now, this is pre-sales, post-sales implementation. I know that we are all expanding. The customer journey is not just pre-sales, so we wanted to include everyone. And since then, Chris and I have stayed connected at PreSales Collective. I know that, and I would say my goal is for every person and everybody in the community, when they interact with us, I want you learning something. That's why we're growing our enablement offering, and we're continuing to grow it, and it's real exciting. Our first official partnership is with Chris White, and that's what this webinar is all about. So we couldn't be more delighted and happier with uh, connecting with somebody who I think is so thoughtful, who is so genuine. And we're super excited. Now, Carrie was supposed to be on this as well, but just like a lot of us, Carrie is at a customer site, and Carrie's number one client needed him there for 3 days straight, and he couldn't join the webinar. And we've all been there, we've all been there. We've all had to travel to an event, and that's what's happening today. So shout out to you, Carrie. I know you really wanted to be here. So I'm going to go ahead and pass it over to Chris White. Thank you so much for joining. The session takeaways today, we're covering what does it mean to be Six Habits certified? If you haven't read the book, that's what it's about. Why is the Pre-Sales Collective and the Tech Sales Mastery Partnership so important? And what's in it for the PSC members? A little insight there is PSC members get $150 off the list price. So you just have to be a member to get that. I'll go ahead and hand it over to you, Chris. Go ahead and introduce yourself, and then we'll jump right in.
Thank you so much, Chris. And by the way, I saw Justin's comment about the book. Justin, that's very kind of you. Thank you very much. First of all, Chris, thank you for inviting me for the webinar. Thank you for extending the opportunity to partner with the PSC. Folks, I know if you're on this webinar, you know that PSC really is the number one place in this industry to connect with other pre-sales professionals. So to have this opportunity to serve this community and partner with Chris in serving this community, frankly, is an honor and a privilege. And so we're just excited to be here. Now, of course, I have a few thoughts that I'm going to share. And by the way, folks, I welcome any and all questions that you care to throw out. Chris, I know one of the things that we talked about in leading up to today's conversation is, first of all, why the partnership with PreSales Collective, why Six Habit, why certification, et cetera. So, first and foremost, I'll just say, why the partnership with PreSales. I mean, I said it a moment ago, I'll say it again. This is, to me, the center of the universe from the pre-sales perspective in the pre-sales industry. And it's this organization and the people associated with this organization that have the opportunity to really level up this profession and the industry. And so to have an opportunity to be a part of that is something that we just feel very privileged to do. I'll ask you a question, Chris. What do you consider to be one of the most, as a manager, what do you consider to be one of the most difficult things to hire for or identify in a candidate?
Curiosity,
Mm,
discovery, social skills. It's kind of easy to test technical skills. It's very difficult to know that your candidate will be able to listen on purpose and understand and actually feel the customer's pain enough to be able to associate a solution with it, with your technical solution in a
Mm.
way that is genuine, that's super hard to hire for.
Yeah, yeah. And I see Pam said active listening skills.
Yeah,
Chris, if I could sort of encapsulate what you were saying, would it be fair to say the soft skills or professional skills, the intangibles, is that a fair way to encapsulate some of the things that you're referring to?
absolutely. And I think there's a layer of you can kind of fake it till you make it with soft skills,
Mm,
but testing that
yeah.
out in situational experience is very, very difficult.
Yeah. I love what Autumn Williams just said. The real skills. That's
Yeah.
really good, Autumn. I don't know if I've ever seen it put quite that way. So Chris, in reverse, as a candidate trying to be hired, what's one of the most difficult things to quote demonstrate? It's the same skills,
Same
right?
skills.
How do you demonstrate curiosity? I mean, we can. There's some ways that we can a little bit, but it's really difficult. Now, Chris, one of the things that you were hoping that I would do was introduce and talk a little bit about my background. I don't want to spend a lot of time doing that, but here's the interesting thing. You know, I was 15 years in an IT consulting career. My specialty was enterprise architect. I was working with Fortune 100 companies like Freddie Mac and Fannie Mae and U.S. federal government. And I made a jump into pre-sales after 15 years as a consultant, thinking I was going to be brilliant. And you've heard me say this before, Chris, thinking I was going to be brilliant because I was an expert in my field and I was good in front of an audience. As I like to say, I could speak and move a mouse at the talk. I could speak and move a mouse at the same time. Here's what I didn't know, Chris. I didn't know anything about sales. And I really didn't understand, quote, the soft skills that go along the critical soft skills and real skills, as Autumn mentioned, that are so critical to our success in a sales role, in a pre-sales role. And here's the trouble or the challenge for me. I had to figure it out on my own, and I had to learn through the school of hard knocks. And along my journey, it was sort of one roadblock after another. It's like at first I had to come to peace with the fact that I'm actually on the same team as my sales counterparts. Then I had to figure out this idea of discovery. I had such a big ego. I was like, well, just get me in there and let me do my thing. Right. And then I started doing discovery, but then I started spending countless hours, if not days, preparing for demos. But I was preparing stuff that nobody ever saw because I was preparing the wrong thing, right? I was focused too much on me and my product and my features and my functions, right? But then I realized that there's certain things that I needed to say, show, and do in the context of a demo to achieve the victory. And after a number of years, I finally discovered a pattern of success. And then when I moved into management, I discovered that the team that I had inherited, they were making many of the same mistakes that I made. And I created the first version of my training in 2010, and those were the seeds that literally the 6 habit seeds were planted then, and they evolved and grew and morphed until the book was published in 2019. So the key point here is that to me, the 6 habits really are the foundation of those real skills, as Autumn said. And I think the certification is important because it does two things. And here's the interesting thing. In fact, if we had the polling, and maybe I could just, I can't tell you how many times, Chris, I've had somebody reach out to me and say, actually, Chris, I referenced your book during an interview. Or they ask me certain things, and I said, well, because I read the 6 habits, I understand A, B, C, and D, right? Well, if people reference the book during an interview, why not actually have the opportunity to take and pass an exam that really demonstrates your knowledge, your understanding, and your ability to apply to certain circumstances and show that as, quote, a badge? Because, and Chris, you're familiar obviously with the 6 habits. As a hiring manager, what would that mean to you if you saw that somebody had the 6 habits certification?
It's and I built this in an on SE onboarding program that I work through, which is validation. So validation is
Mm,
tough. We all learn every day. The hard part about being in a sales engineer is like you live in the gray, you're learning all the time. How do you validate that learning? Over the course of a year, you've probably learned more than some people in their careers, their whole career, right? The certification is the validation of learning that I need to understand you as an individual because I don't know you very well yet, right? And you may be able to talk, walk to walk. And man, we've pushed teams to get certs. It's a nightmare as a manager, I'll be totally honest with you. But as soon as they get the certs, they go, oh man, they feel empowered. And you know what? That if you're in the market or you're trying to validate your learning or you're trying to just feel better about yourself, there's no better way to prove it than to have that little thing on
Mm.
your resume.
That's a really good point. And by the way, I saw a few comments. Sam mentioned you can demonstrate curiosity, asking good questions. Could not agree more. Steve Klein mentioned look for the application of habits during the panel demo. Again, could not agree more. I think the thing that you just said is really important there, Chris, and that is it's really getting that validation from, and I'm going to say a body of work because it's not just Chris White, the Six Habits certification, and we have a leadership committee now, and there's a body of work that's growing. And we have what we call a body of knowledge. It's getting validation from and what's really becoming an industry standard for core skill sets, core principles for success in this profession. And it's getting that validation, knowing that yes, you have not only been through a program, you've passed an exam, and you have certified that you understand these core, and we're going to get into what those core principles are. And I do think it's a confidence builder as well. So Chris, I don't want to just talk, without stop. Let me pause there. What questions did you want to ask me in opening?
Yeah, all great points. I mean, the reason we're leaning so heavily in enablement, especially in this job market, I'm trying to do everything we can to help people in the market. Um, and this is why you've seen things like this partnership and other certifications, because I want to give people the opportunity to validate their learning, to stand up against, all their competition out there. So ditto 1000, I 100% agree with you. Really the first question I have is just kind of like the certification journey itself. I mean, you've kind of told us the story
Yeah.
about how you built it, um, but why go into the certification? My understanding of your platform, Chris, before this was you do SKOs, you do workshops, you do tons of follow-ups with clients. It's kind of like requires you to be on the camera, right?
Yeah.
And I also used your book too. I mean, I've had it on my resume too. Guiltily, I've just like, oh yeah, this is one of my schools of learning. Why the
Yeah.
cert? Why the journey?
Well, I think it's a couple things. First of all, it's the response from the industry. It's the response from the community. I was frankly blown away by the response that I got. Even when I published the book, I wasn't sure what to expect. And Chris, I think you know the story, but a team that runs onboarding for Salesforce reached out to me about 5 months after I published the book, and they run the scout program that all new hires coming into the pre-sales role go through. They reached out to me and on LinkedIn and said, "Hey, we discovered your book. It's going to become required reading for all of our new hires going through our program. And by the way, can we place a bulk order with you?" At that point, I still had a day job and I wasn't even sure what I was going to, I just,
That's
the,
crazy.
the book was published. And so it was in that moment where I discovered, wow, maybe I've actually done something here. And then again, the book has it has really taken on a life of its own. And the Six Habits have taken on a life of their own. And so, yes, I've been running for a little over 4 years now. I've been running these Six Habits workshops, and that has kept me very busy. But I'm going to say there's two aspects of it. Number one, and I have to give a great deal of credit to Bill Ballnave. Some of you may know Bill. He has done some work with us at Tech Sales Mastery. He's now sort of he sort of manages what we're calling the community of Six Habits certified professionals. He came to me honestly over a year ago and said, "Chris, there's really not a professional skills certification in our profession." There are there's lots of technical certifications, Chris. You mentioned that. And there are various certificates that you can get from various programs, but there's really nothing based on an industry accepted framework that covers sort of the core foundation that is a certification. And so he was the one who really convinced me that the time is now to build this. And so we built not only the training program and took, created the videos that really mirror the 6 habits workshops that I run, but then we created an exam with over 150 questions, and they come in 3 categories. There's multiple choice, there's true false, and then there's scenario based questions in each of the 6 habits. And to be honest, Chris, the first time I took the exam, I even missed 3 questions. It's actually a pretty tough exam, and by design, we want this to be meaningful. And here's what we've heard, even from people who have been through one of the live workshops that I've run and then went back through the program and then took the certification. They've said, honestly, Chris, it really made me think. It made me apply the concepts and the principles that you've taught, and it has really made it sticky in my mind and reinforced everything that I've learned. And so that's really it, Chris. Is we just wanted to formalize the 6 habits as a recognized, I'll just say certification, but I feel like I'm overusing that term, but a, a recognized foundation of knowledge and the ability to apply that knowledge and those principles to this profession. And it's something that individual contributors can demonstrate and use to demonstrate a skill set and a knowledge base. And it's something that managers can look for to establish a certain level of credibility within the individuals that they're speaking with. Does that resonate with you, Chris?
Makes tons of sense. And I think it probably resonates with a lot of folks here. It's like, it's hard to, back then it was like, if you're a member of PreSales Collective, I already know you understand there's a craft. It's more than just a job. This is the next step.
Yeah.
So we'll jump right into the habits. And then for everyone here who's live, what we're going to do is we're going to basically frame this up to habit and then a sort of wheel of fortune, draw your name. So Courtney's going to come on camera and we've got this software. She's going to spin the wheel and then we're going to give out the certifications as well.
Yeah.
So if you don't know and you're just joining, we hosted a little bit of a contest and we're giving away some certifications today to the community. So let's jump right into habit number 1. What is habit number 1? And I'm curious of why did you choose that it's number 1? Because there's 6 of them. So is this,
So
was it in like
I'm
some sort
so
of
glad.
order on purpose?
I'm so glad that you asked this, Chris. And I haven't told this story too many times, so I'm excited to share this story. So I told you that the first version of my quote 6 habits was really created in 2010 when I created some training for my team. Here's the interesting thing. Partner wasn't actually part of my, and by the way, at the time I wasn't calling them 6 habits. These are the things we need to be able to do. Okay. And partner actually wasn't one of the things that I talked about. All right. And I actually did sort of a public seminar before I wrote the book, before anybody knew who I was. I did a public seminar locally in sort of in the DC area, and I assembled about 30 former colleagues and friends, and I was chatting with a former colleague of mine who was one of my AEs. I was his SE. And before that session, he and I were chatting, and he said, Chris, he said, the thing that always made you the best is it always felt like we were partners. You always felt like I always felt like you were in it with me, like you had my back. And I never felt like I was dragging you along. And like lightning struck, I was like, that's habit number 1. Habit number 1 is to partner with your sales counterparts. Like that has to be that is the foundation to everything else we talk about, right? Now, look, there are some people out there that there are some sales engineers that are responsible for the entire life cycle. They do prospecting, they do discovery, they do, right. So some sales engineers in our space, sort of in the world, don't work with sales. But for most of us in SaaS and software and technology and cybersecurity, we're working side by side with sales, whether that's a 1-to-1, a 1-to-4, a 1-to-10, a 1-to-20, a pooled, model, what have you. To me, that is the foundation. And Chris, you know this from the book. Anybody who's read the book knows this as well. When I first got into this profession, I didn't even think of myself as being in sales. I didn't think of myself as a sales professional. I was the technical expert. Don't classify me with the sales people. I'm not a salesperson, right? Obviously,
Right.
that was very much the wrong attitude. And when I first started, I sort of had a me versus them or us versus them mentality. Well, that changed very quickly. And I realized pretty quickly that my number one role was sales. I'm now part, and that term has even changed, Chris. We are part of the revenue team, period. And what does that mean? It is fundamentally our number one responsibility is to acquire, protect revenue. And so once we come to peace with that, we need to recognize that sales is a team sport. We are in this together. Now we think differently, we approach things differently. We tend to have slightly different agendas and mindsets, but at the end of the day, we are in this together. And so that's why it's habit number one. I believe it is the absolute foundation of what we do. And Chris, in thinking about today's conversation, what I thought I would do is I would just share one little nugget within each of the 6 habits. And it's interesting, Chris. If I'm fully honest with myself and you and everybody listening, here's the interesting thing. The book is called The 6 Habits of Highly Effective Sales Engineers. But if I'm fully honest, they're not actually habits. They're really principles, right? Partner, prepare, practice, perform, perfect. They're principles. But the interesting thing is that there are habits within each of the habits. And I believe, and when I say habits, here's what I mean. It's the things that we do instinctively. It's the things that we do naturally. It's the things that we do without really having to think about it. And so I think there are habits within the 6 habits. And I'm going to share one in each one. Let's start with habit number 1, to partner with our sales counterparts. What's the mistake we make? We don't think of them as our partners. We think of them more as adversaries. And we're quick sometimes to assume the wrong intent. We're quick sometimes to not extend the benefit of the doubt. I think one of the inherent habits of highly effective sales engineers is to always assume a positive intent with what our sales counterparts say and do, and extend the benefit of the doubt to them. If we take that approach, and if we just naturally take that approach without thinking about it, the chances that the partnership and the collaboration is going to elevate dramatically increases. Does that mean we're always going to get along? Nope. Does that mean sometimes we're assuming wrong? Maybe. But I think it goes miles towards creating a better collaboration with our sales counterparts. So that's the first one I'm going to share. And here's the truth. All of our sales counterparts, our AEs, our BDRs, they're just people too. They're trying to make a living. They're trying to do the best they can. They have fears, they have concerns, they feel a great deal of pressure. The more we just treat them like individuals and assume the right intent, the better off the relationship's going to be. Chris, I'll pause there because I know you want to pull it or spin the wheel, but before we do, any thoughts or comments about what I just shared there?
Yeah. and Justin Weller, who's on the call, knows me very well to be, I was always the person on the team who was like trying to get my team to partner with sales more. I always saw them as a partner. But the only thing I would add is it's very easy to get in the trap of the peer pressure on a solution engineering team and other
Mm,
solution engineers going, "Oh, don't work with David," you know?
mm,
And it's almost like I always felt that I maybe needed to like put the brakes on it myself to almost like appease my team a little bit. So the only thing I would add is like try to be above that, right? Try to take your team and if you're on, you probably know exactly what I'm talking about if you've been in the situation. Always take that high ground with your team
take the
in
higher ground.
sales. Always partner with them. That's exactly what management wants. If you're looking to grow as a solution engineer in management, that's what they want, right? That's what helps the business. It always helps the business. So that's all I would add.
Awesome. All right, Courtney, do you want to spin the wheel?
Are we ready to spin the wheel of fancy wheel of names? Let's do it. All right.
Oh, do we even have a graphic? Oh, I love it. Look at this.
Oh my gosh, that's cool. Courtney came up with this, by the way, everyone.
Fabulous.
Tara
Tara,
or Tara? Awesome.
congratulations, Tara.
Congratulations.
We look forward to seeing you in the sessions.
Cool. All right. Well, keep going. Habit number 2.
So
Do you want me
habit,
to read the habit, Chris, or do you want me to just say habit number 2 and let you do it?
this is your show. So I am following your lead, my friend.
All right. The second habit is to probe into every opportunity and every engagement.
And I'll even take it a step further. It really into every almost every meeting, right? Every and here's where this was born. We'll start there. Was, and again, something that I recognized in myself, Chris, when I first started to really understand the role and this idea that I was in sales, and I mentioned this earlier, and I had such a big ego. I was like, just throw me in there, just invite me in, throw me in there. I'll get in front of the customer or the prospect. I'll just do my thing, right? Until I realized pretty quickly that I'm going in making huge assumptions. I'm basically going in blindfolded. I'm getting in way over my head. And I needed to take and by the way, I had to check my ego at the door, and I needed to take one giant step back and start learning a little bit more about the people that I'm dealing with, what they're trying to achieve, what their priorities are, right? This isn't about me, this is about them. And it's really the learning the art, as I like to say, the art and science of discovery and our role in discovery, whether that's technical discovery or some of the nuanced discovery. Now, we could spend hours talking about that, and frequently I do. The one thing that the one habit within the habit that I will touch on, and we'll start with the mistake that we tend to make, is simply making assumptions. It is so, and by the way, Chris, this partially comes from a place of we talk to people in the same role countless times every day, every week, every month, right? We deal with so many of the same people in similar roles with in similar organizations. Very easy for us to make assumptions, right? We've asked all the questions, we've heard all the answers, we pretty much know it all. But everyone is different and everyone is unique. In fact, everyone wants to feel uniquely understood and valued. And by the way, Chris, I like to tell people, I bet I can prove it. Have you ever heard a prospect or customer say, our situation's a little bit unique? Our situation, have you ever not heard a prospect say, our situation's a little bit unique or different, right? Why? Because everyone wants to feel uniquely understood and valued. So what do we do? And what is the habit that the most effective sales engineers follow? Is they're always seeking to understand. They don't make assumptions. They have that natural curiosity. Even though they have a wealth of experience, it doesn't mean we forget what we know. It doesn't mean we don't learn on or lean on the experience that we bring to bear. But every time we approach an engagement, an opportunity, a new prospect, we're going with an open mind, and we're sincerely curious and asking questions so that we're not making those assumptions. To me, that is one of the foundational habits, the instinctive habits of the most effective sales engineers. Again, Chris, in the interest of time, I'll pause again. Anything you would add to that?
I mean, I fell into it just now. I made an assumption that everybody here on the live webinar felt comfortable sharing their LinkedIn on the chat and connecting with each other. And I didn't say you could do it, right? It's just really weird, right? This is the place to connect. This is the place to grow. This is the place to schedule a 10-minute coffee chat after this and discuss this thing, right? And I didn't approach that moment with that level of curiosity because I probably would have just put it in the chat myself. So I'm here to invite you to do that. I love that. I see that happening. But it does take a certain level of presence, and it's just a wonderful reminder, Chris, to be in that state.
Yeah, and if you're curious, you'll ask questions. And if you're asking questions, and look, I spend lots of time talking about how do we ask questions in such a way that demonstrates credibility and builds credibility. How do we ask questions in such a way that makes people feel comfortable sharing and opening up? And how do we do it in such a way that's not going to? There's all kinds of things that we could talk about here, right? So we're just scratching the surface. But at the end of the day, as long if we're developing the habit of always being curious and not making assumptions, again, I think that's one of the core traits of a highly effective sales engineer, and that's really the foundation of habit number 2.
Love it. To be interesting, you must be interested.
I love
Right?
that.
To be an
Really
interesting
good.
person, you must be interested. To be interesting,
Really
and
good.
people love connecting with interesting people.
Really good.
So if
Really
you're
good.
ready, we can spin the wheel.
Courtney,
Let's hit it.
I hear it spinning. Love that. Oh, the suspense is just killing me, by the way. Joe, we have some applause too. Joe, is it Dundor? Congratulations, Joe. Look forward to seeing
Congratulations,
you in the
Joe.
program. Awesome. All right, Chris, I'm following your lead.
Okay. Habit number 3, prepare. Balancing effectiveness with efficiency.
So let me ask you this question, Chris. It's been a while since you've been out in the field. It's been a while since you've had to prepare for a demo. Have you ever worked on preparing, designing, configuring a demo? Maybe you spent a couple hours, even maybe across a couple days, and then you discovered that when you got into the meeting, much of what you spent time working on never saw the light of day. No one actually saw what it was that you spent all that time working on.
Chris, I do it all the time in my current job. Yes, I've spent a lot of time and in this role it's analytics and it's engagements and it's how do we go to market with this and how do we do that? And then you get in the meeting and it's like, oh, we just want you to show up or something, and you're like, oh my gosh, it is heartbreaking. Like Claudia said, you're like, I did so much hard work on this and I have all the data.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, and by the way, and I love what Claudia said, and by the way, here's the problem, right? If we've spent all this time working on configuring and designing and assembling, what do we want to do when we get in front of the customer? Show
Yeah.
it,
Show it.
right? Whether it's relevant or not, right? Whether there's time for it or not. And usually, where does that usually come from? Where does this idea that we're spending so much time preparing and assembling and building? It usually comes from us wanting to show ourselves off.
Yeah.
Whether it's our product, our smarts, whether it's we like to show how clever we are with the tool or how well we can configure and assemble and design. The compass is pointing where? Usually to us, and not to what does a customer really need or the prospect. What do they really need to hear? What is their story, and how does our solution fit into their story, and how can we make them the hero? And by the way, this comes from a good place, Chris. Why? because first of all, we work for the company, and all the enablement when we go through the company is on what? Our products, our features, our story. Here's how you talk about us, and here's how you demonstrate us, right? So that's the easier thing to do. And the brain is just naturally lazy. So the brain is naturally going to just default to what's easy. It's a lot more difficult to think through, okay, now that I've had some discovery and now that I understand who they are and what they're trying to do, how can I tell a story that puts our solution or demonstrates our solution in a context that's going to make sense to them and makes them the hero of the story? That's actually, and here's the irony. I think it's a heavier mental lift. It's usually a lighter logistics lift or mechanics lift, right? And we
Absolutely.
tend to focus so much on the features, the functions, the mechanics, and then the story gets overlooked. And the truth is, they don't care nearly as much about the product and your features as they do the story and what it can do for them, how it will help them. So what's the lesson? And some people on the call have probably heard me share this before. You may have heard this before. I came up with a term that I call the MVD, the minimum viable demo. And it's similar to, obviously, to the MVP, right? We're all familiar with the MVP. I think those of us, I think the most successful and frankly satisfied sales engineers are those who have learned to tell the best story, create a narrative that's most relevant to their audience without the heavy lift, without spending so much time configuring and worrying so much about, and you've heard me say this before, he or she who buys a shovel doesn't want a shovel, they want a hole. But they don't just want a hole, they want a fence or a tree. But they don't just want a fence or a tree, they want privacy or shade or fruit or right. But we tend to show up with the shovel, right? Don't focus so much on the shovel, focus on the story, and let's just build and assemble the content necessary to tell that story. So to me, that's the habit. And we talked about the habit inside the habit. The habit inside the habit of habit number 3 is when we're preparing for the demo, before we dive into the tool and start configuring and designing and assembling, we take a step back and ask ourselves, what is the story? What is the narrative? What is it that they need to understand and see about how we can help them achieve what they are trying to achieve? Make it about them and not us. And let's just demonstrate those things necessary to help them understand how they can be successful. I'll pause there, Chris.
Oh, wonderful. One of the coolest deals I ever worked on was I was with this really wonderful seller. We're on site. We had 23 states to cover. And this is when we were on airplanes every week, pretty much. And a big deal, just hundreds of K in ACV, massive opportunity for us. I get out and I'm the sales engineer who's got the backpack and I've got the laptop and I've got everything I need in there. I've got a headset.
The projector.
I've got like water bottle here, coffee there. And Brett's like, Chris, leave it all in the car. We're just going to walk in with our notebooks. And I was like, okay.
So
Okay, cool.
disappointed too, probably, right?
A little bit like, well, I felt a little like insecure, So we walk in with a notebook and we got a verbal commit on the deal. We
Wow.
sat down at the table. We didn't show software once. They never saw it.
Yeah.
They did a verbal commit then. We set up a POC. Of course, we had to go through a POC. It was a huge contract. But literally, I didn't show them a thing. It was all about listening to their very, very unique, special, strategic account needs.
Yeah.
It was the coolest deal ever. I mean, I walked away from that trip. I'm still telling the story. This is probably 15 years ago. I don't remember.
Yeah. The more we just really make it about them. And look, there are times that we need to customize and design and assemble and build. Like there are times to do that, right? As long as it's aligned to telling the story that aligns to their true north, right?
Cool. Awesome. Thank you for all the comments, by the way. Wonderful comments. If anybody has any questions, drop them in the Q&A. I think it's enabled, no problem. So just drop them in there. And then I think we're on to Courtney.
I have to say, I do love the sound effects. Trevor, congrats, Trevor.
Congratulations, Trevor. We're going to move on to habit number 4, which is a word that typically is associated with perfect. This feels like Jeopardy. It's to practice.
Practice. So this is an interesting one, Chris. And in fact, I'll even take a half a step back. This probably sounds almost too basic to be one of the habits. And admittedly, it's arguably the easiest in concept. It's the easiest in theory. I'm going to submit that in many cases, it's the most difficult quote in practice. Yes, pun intended. But here's the interesting thing, Chris. Tell me if you've fallen if you've ever fallen into this situation. You've got a demo. Let's say you've got a demo at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. At 2:47, you're still tweaking things here and tweaking things there. And oh, I can add this one last little thing, and maybe I can include this report up until the very last minute. Have you ever fallen into that trap, Chris?
Yes.
Like all the time, right? Like
Yep.
and by the way, it's worse now probably than ever before. Why? Because we go from meeting to meeting to meeting. We're none of us have as much time, I think, in most cases, as we would like. I know this was a trap that I fell into. I was so excited about adding every little thing and just, putting as much in as I could. And the one thing that I would overlook was practice. Click every click, as I like to say. Just check to make sure. And then I'd get in front of the customer, and about 35 minutes into the demo, I'd click into something and it wouldn't be there, or it wouldn't be working, or it wouldn't have the data, or I'd get a 4.4. And then that moment I'd realize, oh crap, that last little change that I made before the demo messed this other thing over here up that I just didn't even think of. And yet now here it is in front of the customer, and they're seeing an error, or they're seeing a report without it. And is it going to kill the deal? Probably not, right? But they're seeing some sort of error that they didn't need to see. Now I'm sort of, I'm getting all flustered, and my face is turning red, and my sales account, right? It's what I refer to as the avoidable mistake. Habit 4, there's really 2 elements to habit 4. First, it's just eliminating the avoidable mistake. Just make sure, particularly if you've customized the demo and you've created some customized configuration, just make sure that the first full run through is not in front of the customer, right? That we've clicked every click. And I think that's the habit. So again, we talked about the habits within the habit. To me, that the habit of not entering or never entering any demo or any situation where you're expected to present or demonstrate something to the customer, and you're doing so with material or a platform and environment that you don't feel reasonably confident everything's working, right? You're just not putting yourself in a susceptible position, because you've been making changes until the last minute, and it's like, well, I hope it works. That's really the habit. Is I'm going in with confidence, knowing that everything's worked, I've checked everything's set up and ready to go. And if they ask to see something that maybe I haven't tested, or I'm not sure it's working, I either know how to handle that with grace and maybe defer that to another meeting, or maybe I go there, but I go there very cautiously, right? So I think that's the habit, is, as I like to say, click every click. Now, this also bleeds into getting aligned with sales and making sure that we are presenting a united front. We probably don't have time to get into that one, or to that extent, Chris. But to me, the habit inside of the habit, I'm entering every meeting and every demo with a high degree of confidence of what it is that I'm going to be showing. The one thing we don't want after the click of a mouse is a surprise. I'll pause there.
I just launched or just released a podcast episode with David Duffett, and one thing he says is he doesn't really believe in the fear of public speaking. It's more of the fear of being unprepared. And
I
so
like
the
that.
only thing I would add is if you feel nervous, just prepare, and that removes that nervousness. And it's exactly going back to what you're saying.
Yeah.
Before I do events, even this one, I have my document perfected. I know where we're going to be, because it just removes any level of stress. You can feel like you can be yourself. You feel like you can be curious. It's hard to be curious if you're not present, and you're not
This is
present if you're freaking out about your environment.
this is a really good point, Chris. And I think it's worth double clicking on. If I believe that the mechanics of what it is that you're showing should largely be shifted into sort of the subconscious. To your point, if I'm so focused on the mechanics and what it is that I'm clicking on or clicking into, and with every click, I'm like, did I do this right or did I set this up right? Because I haven't really practiced. To your point, that I'm not fully tuned in to the audience. I'm not fully connected. And they're going to, more than likely, they're going to sense that. That's
Oh yeah.
really what it's about, is let's shift the mechanics as much as we can into the subconscious so that we're really engaged in a conversation.
Yeah, 100%. Some great comments too. You're not listening. Yeah, you have to 100%, like, you have to have your demo down so you can hear those unsaid things. Oh, did they pause when we asked for the next step? Or what was their temperament? What's the body language look like? Well done.
Absolutely. Love it.
All right, Courtney, over to
Love it.
you.
I have to admit, I may have to figure out a way to incorporate this Wheel of Fortune into my workshops.
Laura.
Laura. Congrats, Laura. Welcome.
All right.
All right, Chris, following your lead.
Habit number 5 is to perform when given the opportunity to present to a customer.
And this is really, it's the demo. It's what, as I like to say, Chris, it's the customer facing event. A lot of us think of it as the demo. It might be a demo, it might be a presentation. And Chris, I was thinking to myself, gosh, I mean, it took 2 chapters in the book just to write all of my thoughts. And when I do a workshop, it takes about 4 hours to cover this part. So I found myself thinking, where should I go with this? What's the one habit that I can, one habit within the habit that I can share with the audience? And I think it's twofold. Number one, I do think it's important for us to understand it, and I think those of us who really get up to speed in this profession understand that, look, there's a difference between backstage conversations and onstage conversations. There are certain things we say backstage that just don't belong, quote, on stage. And when we're in front of a prospect, when we're in front of a customer, we are on stage. Now, does this mean we're pretending to be somebody else? Does this mean we should be fake or play like an actor? Of course not. I saw somebody earlier in the chat, right, use the word authentic. We have to be our authentic selves. But I do think that we need to understand that to a certain degree, it is a performance. And people aren't just buying a product. I mean, they're buying you, they're buying your colleagues, and people want to be excited. People want to be enthused. We are not there to just educate. We are not there to just deliver information about a product or a technology. So I think the more we can understand that there is a sort of an entertainment sort of, and I've heard the term edutainment, but I think if we remember, and I think those sales engineers who recognize that, look, when you step in front of a customer, you're stepping on a stage and the spotlight is shining on you. And there's very specific things we need to say, show, and do, and avoid saying, showing, and doing in order to achieve the objective of the meeting. That's number one. The second thing that I'll mention, I think we're also facilitators. And I think we should think of ourselves, this is not a one-way delivery of a message. We are really facilitating a conversation around how a solution that we are presenting can help them achieve what they're trying to achieve. And so the more we think of it as a facilitated and the more we think of ourselves as facilitators facilitating a productive conversation, I think the more effective we are. So those are the two thoughts. And I know, Chris, looking at the time, we want to try to keep this to about an hour. So in the interest of time, that's sort of the habit that I'll put out there is I think the most effective professionals in this role recognize those two things, and it just, they do it without thinking.
Yeah, wonderfully said. All right, let's spin the wheel, Courtney.
Is it, I don't know if it's Samir or Samir, but welcome, congratulations, and welcome to the program. I look forward to seeing you in the sessions. All right, Chris, final habit.
Habit 6, perfect our craft through continuous improvement. I love this one.
Well, and this, and again, this is one where we probably could spend another hour talking about it, but at the end of the day, I think the most effective sales engineers, and if I can use the term, the habit within the habit, is we never rest on our laurels. I think people that hit somewhere between the 5 and 10 year mark, we tend to get complacent. Why? Because we've more than likely mastered many of the skills that we've been talking about, Chris, and things sort of come more easily and more naturally. And it's easy to stop doing some of the things that we used to intentionally do, right? That would produce the outcomes that we were looking for. So I think it's the habit is never being satisfied with your performance, always seeking to improve your delivery, always looking for opportunities to provide feedback to product, always looking for opportunities to provide feedback to sales, always looking to sales for feedback for yourself. And I see Pam said, be a continual learner. That's really what it's all about. It's being a constant and continuous learner and always seeking to improve and elevate your game. And it takes two things. It takes courage to provide feedback, and it takes a certain level of humility and a certain level of openness to be open and willing to take feedback and accept that at no point am I going to have it all figured out. At no point am I going to know it all. And at no point will I have achieved full mastery on everything. And by the way, the industry is changing, technology is changing. There's always something to learn. So that's, to me, that is, and by the way, when we talk about sales, we're right, and that's why there's the habits are in a circle. We're right back to the partnership with sales, because I feel like the feedback loop with sales is an important part of building the partnership.
Oh, wonderfully said. All right, let's roll it one more time and we'll close it out. All right, Josh.
Nice.
Congratulations to all our winners. Chris, you really deliver this so wonderfully. Thank you so much. I mean, I'm inspired. I'm always open to connecting. For everybody who's joined, please reach out, connect with us. PreSales Collective. I truly believe, and it just is foundational to this program we're talking about today. If you're investing in yourself through meaningful connections, if you're investing in professional and personal development, if you're growing together, you will be at an elevated space in your career and in life, no matter what you pursue. This applies to cooking, it applies to solution engineering, it applies to pre-sales or sales. So thank you so much for joining us. Really appreciate you all who came.
Likewise. Thank you, Chris.